Okay, so hopefully we're live now. Just gonna do some checks. So basically, what we intend on doing today is to do this live stream and hopefully do this successfully because last time um, things didn't really work out too well. Yesterday when we tried doing it, there's some technical issues and problems. So I hope I hope this is functioning. So I'm just gonna make some checks before we make a start. Just bear with me, guys. Okay, brilliant, it's working. Okay. Bismillah and alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, which basically means may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all, just in case we have some non-Muslim guests that actually watch this or come across this live stream. So the topic of today's video is God, fact or fiction. Now, this is a very, very interesting topic, something I've been thinking about. Obviously, working in this field, it's something we think about a lot already, but I've been recently preparing some thoughts on this for an upcoming lecture that I'm going to be delivering soon. And what I wanted to do was take this opportunity to share some of these ideas and thoughts with you too. Now, to begin with, the very first thing that I want to mention and I want to point out and I want to highlight is I don't believe we are in any position to put God on trial. And what I mean by this is that normally when we engage with the question of God, and whenever there's a discussion that takes place between a Muslim and an atheist, for example, and we're discussing the topic of God, you know, we seem to think and assume that the atheist is in a position to challenge God's existence, that he's in the position to be given evidence for God's existence, and therefore at that point he can put himself in the position or herself in the position to determine whether the evidence is adequate enough and whether they would accept it or not, and whether they would take it and allow it to lead them to the belief in God and for them to accept that God exists. What I want to suggest is that I don't believe they're in any position to do that. Because what I believe is that when you deny God, when you say there is no God, there is no creator, right off the back, it puts you in a position where you can't make sense of anything. You can't make sense of reality. You can't make sense of the world around you. And so I want to start this discussion of today with that point, which is that let's look at it from the opposite perspective. Before I give you arguments for God's existence, let's take a moment to look at life in the absence of God, reality in the absence of God. What does that mean? Right? Why is it that when you deny God, it puts you in a position where you can't make sense of pretty much anything, right? Now, the very first thing I want to mention is something uh, Nietzsche mentioned. Now, Nietzsche is one of the most predominant philosophers of the past couple of centuries. Very well known. You know, if you studied philosophy or looked into philosophy, you've definitely heard of Nietzsche, and we've definitely heard of something he said. One of his famous statements that God is dead. And normally, when we hear this or we come across this, we assume, look, here was a philosopher who denied God and argued against God's existence. But what we forget is that when he made the statement in his book, one of his writings, when he made the statement that God is dead, he wasn't really trying to make a case against God because he felt that that was already being done, that people were already moving away from the idea of God, they were turning away from a creator. What he was doing when he said this was he was speaking to those individuals of a secular disposition, those individuals of, the humanists that had already denied God, that had already turned away from God. And what he was highlighting to them or trying to get them to think about through this narrative that he wrote was that now that you've denied God, you've turned away from God, you've killed God essentially, the values that you're holding on to, the values that originally you took from religion, you eventually are going to realize that you're going to have no way of justifying or accounting for those values, those moral outlooks, those things we believe to be right and wrong. You're not going to be able to have any foundation for those anymore. And eventually what's going to happen is it's going to lead you to nihilism, which is that there a lack of meaninglessness, right? And he predicted that the coming centuries would be centuries of nihilism because people were turning away from God. Now, what I want to do is I want to go slightly further and want to really reflect over this idea of turning away from God and denying God. What does that mean for us? Well, if you look at it from the perspective of your personal life, there is no meaning, there is no value, there is no purpose if you deny God. And these things, value, meaning, purpose, are things that we hold so dear to our lives. Let's just take one example, that being of purpose. Every single one of us is searching for purpose. We're looking for purpose in our life. What is the ultimate purpose of my existence in the world around me? What is the purpose of all of this? This is an integral, fundamental question every single one of us asks. But if you deny God, you put yourself in the position where you have to recognize and acknowledge that everything in existence is a result of an accident. It's just one big physical accident, without purpose, without meaning, without any direction. There is no creator, there is no controller, there is nothing or no one that's directing what's taking place in existence right now. It's just one big accident. Atoms and molecules in motion at random, right? Without any direction, without any purpose. If that's the case, then that reality trickles down into whatever manifests within this universe, which is our existence too, which means the world and us and everything that exists has no ultimate purpose. It's just one big accident. So there is no purpose. Then this further, we can develop this idea and think about it from the perspective of ethics and morals and values, right? Similar to what Nietzsche spoke about. If you deny God, then where is the claim to any objective sense of morals, objective morality? As human beings, when we look at, evil, when we look at something that's bad and something that's wrong, we jump and we say, this is wrong. We should not do this. You should not do this. We jump and say, this is good or this is bad. And we make moral claims. We take a moral stance, right? However, without God, there is no claim to objective morals. It's just subjective, our subjective opinions and ideas. You may say, morals evolve. But if morals evolve, then they're subject to evolution, which means they're subject to change. They will continue to evolve and change. There is nothing objective about morals anymore, right? There's nothing that's intrinsically good or bad. Because if morals are subject to evolution, evolution is not concerned with what's true, what's good or bad. It's concerned with survival. So morals become whatever is conducive to survival, right? Instead of being pegged in something far more deeper and more profound and something far more substantial, that being good and bad, right? There is no such thing anymore. It's just your subjective opinion or your evolved ideas, if you can say such a thing, right? So there is no morality. There is no objective morality. It's just opinions. It's just views. Then, right? Also, what we can start to appreciate is that as soon as you turn away from God and you deny God, you slowly start to realize that there is no purpose to life. There is no value to ultimate value. There is no meaning. There are no morals. There are no objective morals, at least. Think about our rational faculties as human beings, the very tool that we use to engage in such discussions about God's existence. We assume to get involved in any discussion as a human being, to have any engagement on any topic, you have to assume that you have truth-bearing rational faculties, that we have minds that have the ability to attain truth, to come to truth. But if you deny God, then how can we even make a claim for truth-bearing rational faculties? These are ordered faculties that we are engaging with. Our rational faculties, abilities are ordered. We think, we believe that we could take in information and we could process the information and we could try to understand the information and come to the truth of what's being said. Hence, when an atheist engages with a believer or a Muslim about God's existence, he assumes or she assumes they have the ability to taking the information that the believer is given, process that argument or that information and decide whether it's true or not. But how do you make sense of these faculties? On atheism or naturalism, if our minds have just evolved, then there is no reason to believe that we have truth-bearing faculties, right? That we have faculties that can lead us to truth. Again, because evolution, the process is concerned with survival, it's not concerned with truth. And what the experts have shown is that true beliefs as well as false beliefs can both result in survival adequately. So there's no reason to trust our minds. We have to become skeptical. We have to remain skeptical about our rational faculties. And if that's the case, then are we in any position to argue against God or to assess even if whether God exists or not? So we can start seeing this when you turn away from God and you deny God, it sort of strips you from being able to account for anything really, right? So I would even argue that if you just ponder over existence and reality in the absence of God, that is proof enough that God is necessary, and you can't deny God or turn away from God, right? Now, if that's not enough, let me share some positive arguments with you, right? Just for those that would like something a bit more, some sort of evidence or argument for God's existence. And before I do this, let me make something very clear that from the Islamic perspective, our outlook on life is that life is a test, right? And we are here to be tested. And an integral part of that test is to first recognize or see whether this human being, us, we can use the faculties that God has given us to lead us to Him, to find Him. God is not going to spoon feed us here. He's not going to appear in front of us and say, "Here I am." Because if God was to do this, then the test is over. There is no more test anymore, right? The examination is over. So what God wants to see is, can we use all of the faculties He's given us? Can we use the world that He has surrounded us with, all of the signs that He's placed within existence in the world around us, to see whether we can use our faculties and study the world around us to conclude that He exists? Can we use these things to lead us to Him? Can we then also use our minds and engage with the revelation that He sends and find Him through this? Right? So there is proof enough for that person that is sincere, that's sincerely seeking and searching for his creator or her creator, right? But it's not going to be a case of spoon feeding, or here I am and here is the creator. Then it defeats the purpose of this existence, right? That being said, let me share a very powerful argument from the Quran with you, which for the sincere seeker will be enough, from a logical and rational perspective at least. In the 52nd chapter of the Quran, verses 35 and 36, God says, or were they created by nothing? Or were they the creators of themselves? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? But rather, they are not certain. Right? Now, these are the two verses. In verse 35, God says, or were they created from nothing? Or were they the creators of themselves? Verse 36, God says, or were they the creators of the heavens and the earth? But rather, they are not certain. Now, I want us to reflect upon these verses from two different levels. Level one is how they are intended, or for who they are intended, which is human beings. Predominantly, initially, the Meccans at the time of revelation, and by extension, us as human beings that live now, that engage with the revelation of God. Let's put ourselves in this position and ask the question, can we come from nothing? Think about that for a second. Use your reason. Let's use our faculties. Can something come from nothing? If you really think about this, the conclusion that we'll come to is, out of nothing, nothing comes. This is an age-old principle. If there is nothing, nothing itself has no potential to produce anything. Out of nothing, nothing comes. So we can cross out that possibility. Possibility number two, were they the creators of themselves? Can we create ourselves? In other words, can we bring ourselves into existence? And again, the answer, if we reflect upon it and think about it for a second, the answer is no. Because to create yourself, you have to already exist. But if you are already in existence, then how are you creating yourself? Because you're already there. It makes no sense, because you already have been brought into existence. You already have been created. Therefore, how can you create yourself again? It doesn't make any sense. It's not only logically possible, it's a paradox, it's a contradiction. So we can cross that option out too. Then God says, well, were they the creators of the heavens and the earth? Well, one way we can reflect upon this is, can we create something so great, such as the universe that we live in? Is it even possible for us to create such a universe? And if we reflect upon our existence and our limitations, we will realize that no, we can't do this. Another way we can look at this is, can we create something that preceded us, that came before us? Because God is mentioning the universe, and we know that the universe came into existence far before we came into existence. So then how can we create something that came before us, that's necessary for our existence to take place? It doesn't make any sense, right? And then God says, He concludes by saying, but rather they are not certain. And He leaves only one possibility open for us to conclude ourselves. We've gone through a process of deduction, a logical deduction, removing all of the possibilities that don't make sense. The only real possibility that remains is that everything that exists, including us, were created by an uncreated creator. That is the most logical possibility. Now, let's look at it from the second level. The second level I want us to look at these verses from is to take the logical possibilities that God is mentioning here and apply them to things that begin to exist. Because the scholars that have interpreted these verses and given us an exegesis of these verses, one thing they mention is that the logical possibilities that are mentioned within these verses can be applied to anything that begins to exist, that comes into existence. In other words, they can be applied to anything other than God, right? So the universe that we live in, we know the universe began to exist. It came into being. If the universe began to exist, then let's ask these questions. Can the universe come from nothing? Again, out of nothing, nothing comes. The universe couldn't come from nothing. Could the universe create itself? Again, how could we say the universe created itself? Because for the universe to create itself, it had to exist and not exist at the same time, which is an impossibility, right? Could the universe be created by something that precedes it, that came before it? Now, that's a possibility on the surface. Yes, the universe could be created by, for example, another universe. So, universe 1 can be created by universe 2. But then we shouldn't stop there. Well, what created universe 2? Well, universe 2 could be created by universe 3. And universe 3 could be created by universe 4. And universe 4 could be created by universe 5. Now, if this goes on forever, ad infinitum, forever, for an infinite time, an infinite chain of causes creating universes, then would we even have universe 1? The answer is no, because you cannot traverse the infinite. It's impossible. It's like saying, I want to go home. Say, for example, I've come to London. Now, I want to go home to, for example, Manchester, which is a city in the UK. Now, for me to go to Manchester, I have to get on a bus. But for me to get on a bus, I need a pound coin, a £1 coin. I don't have a £1 coin. So what do I need to do? I need to ask for a pound coin of the person that's behind me at the bus stop. I ask that person, they say, I would love to give you a pound coin, but I don't have a pound coin. So let me ask the person behind me. Now they ask the person behind them and they say the very same thing, which is, I would love to give you a pound coin, but I don't have a pound coin. So they have to ask the person behind them. Now, if this chain of asking permission goes on forever, let me ask you guys a question. Would I ever get on the bus and go home? I want you to really reflect upon this and think about this for a second. Would I ever get on the bus and get home? That's a very, very important question to ask. So hopefully you can understand the point here. Sorry, I'm just trying to get something up here quickly. So the point being is that if I never get the pound coin and that chain of someone requesting continuously for a pound coin goes on forever, I would never get on the bus. That event would never take place. In the same way, if there's an infinite chain of causes for the universe that went on forever, our universe will not come into existence, which highlights there has to be a first cause, a first uncreated cause, right? And that is the most logical conclusion, which is the universe and everything that exists was created by something which is uncreated and eternal. That's the most logical cause. Now, obviously, you can look at this from the perspective of the argument from dependency, and you can make another very powerful argument, but we don't need to go into that today. I think this argument in and of itself is very clear and very, very sufficient for anyone that's sincere that understands this. This is a very powerful, simple, logical argument for God's existence. Now, that being said, say someone that's thought about this and reflected upon this and understands this, say they've thought about this, argument that I've just made now. Say, for example, they probably haven't even needed this argument. They've just looked at the universe. They've looked at the order of the universe that we live in, the fine tuning of the universe, and through the process of a simple design argument, if you like, they've come to the conclusion that there has to be a creator, a cause. Don't stop there, right? It's not, I would say it's not enough. We need to think a bit further than this. To conclude that there is a God is a starting point, that there is a creator. But just to now accept that and believe that and stop there is not sufficient. If it doesn't change your life in any way, shape, or form, then what is the difference between believing and not believing, right? But I would even argue that believing in God must result in certain things for us as human beings, and that's what Islam teaches us. That the belief in God is one thing, but what's more important is that how does the belief in God now change our lives? What does this mean about our existence? One of the questions we can ask is, well, if God existed, why did He create us? What was the purpose of our creation? That's a very, very important question that we can ask, and we should ask, and that we do ask. And it's a very natural question that should come in the mind of someone that has come to the conclusion that there is a cause, there is a creator. Okay? Now, at this point, we ask the question, what is the purpose God created us for? Now, something I want us to understand is that this answer cannot come from us. In the way that we've logically come to the conclusion that there is a creator, there is a cause, we can't do the same thing and conclude what the purpose of our existence is, because that knowledge is with God. The only way we can know what the purpose of our existence is if God Himself tells us what the purpose of our existence is, right? Otherwise, it's possible for us to figure out because we didn't create ourselves, right? So God, what does He say? Has He told us? Has He sent revelation? Of course He has. We believe that the Quran is the final revelation of God that He sent to humanity. Now, it's not the time and place right now to give you proofs for the Quran being a miracle. That's another discussion in and of itself. But what I would say is that if you look into the Quran itself, you would realize that there are some profound realities and truths about the Quran which are a signpost which point us to the fact that the Quran itself was a revelation from God. The fact that it's preserved. And God Himself says in the Quran that He has revealed it and He will preserve it. It's preserved to this day. The fact that the Quran, its message is so concise for a book that was revealed over 23 years. The Quran didn't come down in one shot to the Prophet, peace be upon him, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Quran came down in parts, piecemeal, over 23 years. And then it was later compiled into one book. That being the case, the consistency in the message of the Quran, the themes, the topics, the ideas, the consistency in all of these things, it's clear. There is no contradictions. Take, for example, the concept of God. When it comes to the concept of God, it's exactly the same from beginning to end. There are no changes. God is uniquely one, and this is maintained throughout the entire Quran. It's not the case where on one part of the Quran God says He's uniquely one, and then God says there is a Trinity, and then God says there's 20 gods. No. God says He's uniquely one, and this follows throughout the Quran. God tells us He's all powerful and all knowing. This follows throughout the Quran. God tells us this, He is the one that is the just, He is the wise, and these realities follow throughout the Quran. The consistency is clear, right? And these things are profound signs which point towards a creator. Now, that being said, obviously there is the linguistic miracle of the Quran, which I really encourage you guys to go away and study further. There are the historical accuracies of the Quran. There are some numerical accuracies of the Quran, etc., etc. There's so many. But for me, one of the most profound miracles of the Quran is in its message itself. The way the Quran addresses the human being and answers those fundamental questions that every single human being asks, right? Another profound reality about the Quran is when you read it and you study it, you realize that it's not going to benefit anyone but me, but us. It's for us. There is nothing in there that benefits the Prophet, peace be upon him, from us following it and adhering to it. There's nothing that benefits God. God is free of need, as He tells us in the Quran. He's ghani, He's free of need. He doesn't require anything of anyone. If all of us got together and worshipped God in the most perfect way possible, it would not increase the majesty of God in any way, shape, or form. And if every single one of us turned away from God and didn't worship Him, it would not decrease the majesty of God in any way, shape, or form. God is not in need of us. And therefore, we realize when we study the Quran that everything in the Quran is for us and our benefit. So that we are successful in this life. So that we not only figure out what the purpose of our existence is, which God clarifies and tells us clearly, but also that God tells us how we can fulfill this purpose in the best way possible. It's guidance for us, right? It's guidance for us. God says this is guidance for mankind, right? So it's for us, and that shows us and should highlight to us that there is no ulterior motive for anyone to have made up the Quran, right? And to have just made it up and given it to us. Right? Because whenever someone lies and makes something up, there's always a hidden agenda. There's always an underlying reason for that to happen. But if you look at the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there were times where he was offered everything. The people at the time in Arabia said, look, stop preaching this message. We will give you whatever you want. You want money, power, women, whatever you want, we'll give it to you. Stop preaching this message. The Prophet rejected everything for this message, highlighting that he had nothing to gain and nothing to benefit from. Right? That in itself is a very clear sign that this is not from the Prophet, peace be upon him, that they must be from a divine origin. That being said, what is the purpose? What did God create us for? Like I said, the entire Quran revolves around the purpose of our existence, which is, God tells us very clearly in the Quran that He created us to worship Him and Him alone. Right? And everything else in the Quran revolves around this, helps us and aids us in fulfilling this purpose of our existence. Right? So God tells us clearly He did not create us for any other reason but to know Him and to worship Him. Right? That is the purpose of our lives. Worship is comprehensive in Islam. Right? When you worship God alone, that means that it's not only the ritualistic acts, but it's every single act you do in your life. right? Which becomes a means of worship. And what's very beautiful about worshiping God alone is that it truly elevates and frees the human being. It truly dignifies a human being, because when you become a slave of God, when you worship God alone, you are no longer a slave of the world. You are no longer a slave of created things. You are no longer a slave of people, ideas, theories, ideologies, money, materialism. No, you are a free person because you submit to God alone. And in doing so, you are freed from the shackles of this material, ephemeral reality, right? That's how worshiping God alone elevates you as a human being, right? And that's something very profound to attain. When a human being attains this, he truly finds peace and tranquility. It doesn't mean that life becomes cushy and easy. No, this life is a test. We'll still be tested. But by worshiping God alone, relying upon God alone, it gives you the tools you need to navigate this life and the storms of this life. Another thing this brings me on to is the idea of reliance upon God, trusting upon God, putting your trust in God alone. This is another very beautiful thing in Islam. See, as human beings, we are dependent creatures. We always are putting our trust on and depending upon other people, systems, ideas, etc. We're so dependent and reliant. And what happens is we experience this throughout life time and time again, that people always let us down. Systems always let us down. We are let down by people throughout our lives. We ourselves let ourselves down, right? And this brings a lot of anxiety and worry to the human being. We're always feeling unstable. We're always worried about, how am I going to do this? How am I going to pay these bills? Where am I going to get my money from? How am I going to take care of X and Y and do this, that, and the other? We're always worried about our jobs, about our work, about our bosses. There are so many worries we have. We have so many, masters, if you like. But when you submit yourself to God alone and you put your trust in God alone, knowing that He is the one that has all power, He is the one that's in control of every single thing that happens to us, then we rely upon Him and we trust upon Him. We do whatever we can in our ability and we put our trust in Him. It just frees us from any worry and any additional concern. Anything that befalls us, if it's something negative and bad, we know it's from God and there is inevitably good in that for us, in that trial, in that test. Just put your trust in God. Rely upon Him, right? But anything good that happens to us, we thank God and we know it's from Him. It puts the human being in a very beautiful, balanced position. It brings balance to life. It brings balance to your soul, your heart, your mind. And when the human being attains that position, it's a beautiful place to be, right? You will truly thrive as a human being by doing this, by being in this state. And these are just two very simple and beautiful benefits. And when you put your I want us to really appreciate. There's a very beautiful verse in the Quran where God says, "Think about the condition," and I'm paraphrasing, "of two people, one who has many slave masters and one that has only one master. Whose condition is better?" Right? We find when we don't worship God, when we don't submit ourselves to our Creator, we find ourselves enslaved to 101 things, ideas, people, just whatever it is. We are enslaved to so many different things. But when you submit to God alone and you truly do this, it frees you from the slavery of everything else. And to attain this position is to attain the greatest thing any human being can attain, right? Because not only will it bring you peace and tranquility and good in this world, but it will make sure it will ensure that you are successful in the next world and you attain eternal paradise. You attain the pleasure of God, and there's nothing greater than that, right? So to summarize, what I'm saying is it's one thing. So to summarize, let me conclude everything I've said. Number one, I don't believe we're in any position to challenge the existence of God, because when you deny God, reality falls apart and nothing makes sense. Number two, God has given us enough signs, enough reasons to believe in Him. For any sincere individual to reflect upon these signs, to use his rational faculties, to engage with the world that we exist in, to pick up on the signs of God, and there is enough there to lead us to God. But second, something to understand is that God is not going to spoon feed you. He's not going to appear in front of you, because if he was to do this, then the purpose of this existence is over. The test is over. There is no more test. There is no more examination, right? Thirdly, once you understood and you've come to the conclusion that there is a creator, there is a God, and you understand that He exists, now don't stop there. Because if you continue to live the way you're living in a worried, you know, uh, just in a worried, unbalanced existence, then to believe or not to believe doesn't benefit you in any way, shape, or form. Right? As human beings, we're creatures that look for utility, usefulness. We look for things. How do things benefit us? and know that believing in God and Islam and the revelation, God sent revelation throughout history to clarify this to people, that the belief in God is one thing, but to then live by it and live by the purpose of your existence, the purpose God created you with, is what's really important and what's really significant. And that's what we need to focus on, right? And when you do this, you will find peace and tranquility and only good, right? Only benefit in this life and in the next life. So hopefully I've given you guys some things to think about and reflect over. I'm going to conclude and finish up on this point. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you are someone that's a non-Muslim that's interested in Islam, please let us know, and I'm sure someone will be able to help you. If you have any thoughts, please share them. If you are a Muslim that's been watching this, please make sure to share this on your Facebook pages too, so other people can benefit from this live stream too, hopefully, God willing. That being said, I thank you guys for watching. Until next time, take care.